Hi everybody, my name is Martijn van Moderom. I'm product manager at Avonic, and today I'll be hosting the webinar about the controller, the AV-CON300-IP. So in this webinar we'll have a chance for you to ask any questions that you might have. So on the right side of your screen you will find this little chat window, and please make sure to ask us any questions that you might have, and it's our pleasure to answer them as fast as we can. But if for some reason we need some more time to get back to you, we'll make sure to do that after the webinar. So any questions that you might have, please do feel free to set them in this chat window and we'll make sure to follow them up. So in this webinar we'll be talking about the controller. So for most of you, you already know this controller. It's been around for some time. But we'll spend most of the time just going slightly deeper into the functions and features of this controller. A little introduction about Avonic, that's what we're starting with in a second. A little introduction about the controller, not too much, and then we'll dive into the features, applications, and how to set it up properly. And then we'll have some time for more questions, of course, during the webinar. So Avonic is a company. It has been founded about 13 years ago, and we have a background in AV distribution, so we've used to sell other brands, and from there evolved into producing our own cameras. So we do the product design, manufacturing, warehousing, sales and support all the way from the Netherlands, which is where our headquarters is located. We have a focus on Pro AV installations, so that means that our products are mainly designed to be used in fixed installations. And currently our brand is being distributed in over 30 countries on basically every continent. So this is the controller that we are talking about. Most of you have already seen that, and as you can see on the back side, you have an RJ45 port right there, which is the network port, and then there's another 5 ports on the other side, which are the serial connections. So that is the main connection method for this controller to be used, and I'll explain the rest in a minute. So it's a very versatile multi-camera controller. You can control up to 35, not 45, even though my slide says that, over serial, and you can control up to 255 cameras over IP. How to set it up, I'll let you know in a few seconds. It has a very high precision joystick, so you can have very fine control over your cameras. A great feature is the manual focus knob, so this gives you fine control over the manual focus. Makes it a lot easier to get things in focus than having to use an IR remote or anything else. And we have a couple of customizable shortcuts, and all of this will be shown to you in a few minutes. So our controllers are being used in various different applications. So you can find them in broadcast environments, in studios. You can find them in educational applications where there's a multi-camera setup in the larger rooms, for example, to capture any events going on there. We have conferencing, like city council halls, for example. There's video conferencing solutions where you have multi-camera setups, or webcasting studios like the one we are having here, and houses of worship like churches. So as mentioned, you have control over 35 cameras over a serial connection, and this is just a quick layout of how to do that. So on the top you see the 35 cameras, on the bottom the controller, and we have the 5 RJ45 outputs on the controller connected to 7 cameras each. So why is there a limitation to 7 cameras? Well, this is basically a limitation in Visca. The Visca protocol has 7 unique identifiers, and that's it. So we can use only 7 cameras in a single daisy chain, because we need to set this ID in the camera. You can do that usually in the on-screen display or in the web interface of the camera. Look for something like serial settings, or usually system settings when it goes into the web interface. And you have a Visca ID or a Visca address. Set this to a unique ID in every daisy chain, and this way the controller knows which camera it is controlling, and the camera will only respond to the commands being set to this unique ID. So as I've mentioned before, we have 5 RJ45 ports on the back, 7 cameras each, and then you have a total of 35 cameras which you can control over serial. Then over IP it's a slightly simpler setup. You don't have the limitation of Visca IDs in that sense, because the unique identifier in this case is an IP address, so it almost allows you for a limitless amount of cameras basically. But the setup is much easier. You hook up your cameras to the network, and to the same network you hook up your controller, and that's all there's needed to control up to 255 cameras. So very straightforward. So let's dive into the real hands-on bit of this webinar. If you give me a second, I'll switch to another camera, and we'll be showing you how to set this controller. And there we are. This is the CON300 from above on my desk. So let's start by turning it on. There's a little switch back there. Just press it to turn it on, and you can see everything lights up, knowing that it's on. Let's wait for a second. And this is the screen you'll see when you turn it on for the very first time. So let's start by setting up this controller to be used over network. So let's go into the menu using this little button right there, menu. Press it once, and this is the menu of the controller itself. So for the first time, start with going to the Ethernet settings. These are the Ethernet settings of the controller itself. So make sure that these are filled out. By default, the DHCP server, the DHCP mode is turned on, so it will receive the IP address and subnet mask and gateway from the router. If any of these values are blank or saying 000, you have to turn the DHCP off and enter the IP address and all these values manually. So this is a good first step to take when you connect one of these controllers, is check whether or not these settings are set correctly. Because this is usually where things go wrong, and when customers start calling that their controllers aren't working, it's basically because this screen isn't filled out correctly. So this is a good measure to check this every time you hook up a controller in a new network. So let's go back in the menu. By the way, going back is pressing the controller to the left and entering the menu, and confirming anything is this little button on top of the controller. There you go. It will ask you to restart, so if you've made any changes to this menu, you have to take a restart because the network settings need to be refreshed. If you haven't made any settings or changes to these settings, press no. I didn't make any changes, so I can skip the reboot. So now you've set up your controller to work well over your network, and that should be up and running. However, we haven't defined any cameras to control, so let's start doing that. Go to the Visca over IP menu. Now this is the menu where you basically define all your cameras and how they should work together with the controller. So we have a custom address list, which is this setting. This is where all your cameras will be listed once you've added them. This is where you add new cameras. We'll do that in a second. This is where we assign cameras to IP channels. We'll also explain that in a minute. And then there's still real-time refresh. I'll explain that as well in a minute. So let's start by adding a new camera. It gives you 3 options: standard, legacy, and Sony. For all of our cameras, standard would work just fine. We've added the other 2 just for extra compatibility. If you have any older cameras in your network that use Visca, you can use legacy, or if you're using Sony cameras, you can select Sony, kind of self-explanatory. So let's go ahead with the standard camera because we're using one of our CM70 series. And then you get the question, which protocol would you want to use, UDP or TCP? Now, I would say it is good practice to use TCP over UDP because TCP allows you for some packet loss correction and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more elaborate, and speed isn't really a thing when it comes to controlling a camera over IP, because the IP is so fast, the protocols, that it really doesn't matter in that sense. So I would say a good measure is TCP because you get a little bit more information back from the camera, and it allows you for packet loss correction. So once you've selected that, it will ask you the port number. So 1259 is entered by default, which is also the default port in our cameras. So you don't have to change this for either TCP or UDP in our cameras. If you have made any changes to the port settings in our cameras, then yes, you would need to change this value. So let's go ahead by defining the IP address of the camera I have right here. So 192.168.178.167, yeah, that's correct. Confirm, and there you go. A new camera has been added, and it has been added to this managed custom address list. So here you have the camera you've just added. So if you want to make any changes to any of the cameras you've just added, go into this list, and here you can see that you can change all of these settings, and you can also delete the camera from the list. Now we don't want to do that, so let's go back in the menu. Let's go back again. Now I want this particular camera that I've just added, I want this camera to correspond with the button I have right there. These are my 5 shortcuts for my cameras over IP, and also 5 shortcuts for my cameras over serial connections. So let's start by assigning this address to channel number 1. So here you have your 5 shortcuts, your 5 buttons right there, channel 1, 2, 3, and 5. Select the first one because I want to add it there, and here you have your address list again. So this will list all the cameras you've added to your controller. So if you have 255 cameras, you'll have a list of 255 cameras to choose from. I've just added one, so this will have to do. There we go. I just assigned a camera to my shortcut button right there. So the final bit in this menu is the real-time refresh. So this basically means that the controller is inquiring the camera every second, if I'm not mistaken, and it will receive the status of the camera mainly when it comes to white balance, when it comes to autofocus or manual focus, and the auto exposure setting. So it will give you feedback from the camera which of the settings is chosen. So if the camera is, for example, set to auto focus, this button will light up as soon as you select the camera. And if you have selected manual focus by turning this little knob right there, this button will turn off. I'll see if I can show you in a second. So this is basically the setting that you can turn on or off, whether or not you want to check the status of the cameras. I would say leave it on for all of our cameras because our cameras respond really well to that and they have no problems with it. So you can leave it on. It's just a feature that if you're using any other cameras that don't respond really well to this, you can turn it off as a safety measure basically. Okay, let's exit this menu. Exit again. As you can see, it is saving the data and now it's back to the screen we've started with. As you can see, it still says that it is controlling Visca over serial and it's assigned to address 1. As you can see, I can switch any of these channels and it won't work because there's no camera connected to any of these channels. But also what we want to do is not control over serial, but control a camera over IP. So we have to switch the controller to IP mode. So we have a nice little button right there. This is your toggle to switch between a network mode, Visca over IP, as you can see on the screen, and serial mode. So for both these modes, these 5 buttons are your shortcuts. So you can control 5 cameras over serial directly and up to 5 cameras directly over network. So let's switch back to the network. So if you have more than 1 camera or more than 5 cameras for that sense, you have your nice address button right there. So by pressing this button, there you go. You've just entered into your custom address list. So here you can see that you have all these different cameras. So to start off, the list will always list the first 5 channels. So these are the channels you've got right there. If you've added a 6th camera or 255 for that matter, it will just add on the bottom of this list up to 255 cameras. So it's very convenient. You can control all of your cameras simply by selecting it right there from this list. So if you have many cameras, then this button will be very convenient. But we don't need it. So let's exit this menu because we've assigned our camera to one of our shortcuts, our channel buttons. So let's select channel number 1. There we go. here you can see that the camera is actually connected. It quickly reads the status of the camera and it will let you know if it can't connect or anything. But this is basically, if you look up there, it's sending commands and it's receiving commands back from the camera, so your connection is healthy. The first icon basically on this side is that you've actually connected the controller to the network, so that's also a good check. So let's see if I can get myself on screen for a second. There we go. And as you can see, I can now control my camera right there using my joystick. So this is our little studio right there. And I'm now controlling my camera over IP, which is great. So there we go again. So now you've set up your controller, you've set up the controls for the controller, and that's the very basics. So let's dive in a little bit deeper. So what else is there on the controller? I've already told you there's autofocus, so if I press this button, the camera I've just controlled will switch to autofocus, and if I want to fine-tune the focus, I can use this button to change the focus again. So let's see if I can get myself back on screen. It will show you that this is really going bad. So I'm really out of focus. Quickly switch back to autofocus, and there we go. We can fine tune from that point if you want to, and it will remain in manual focus as long as you want to. So another thing is presets. These are very convenient. So most of the cameras that you want to control are using presets basically. So how to set up presets with this controller over IP or over serial, the process is the very same. So let's select the presets, as you can see here, and enter the set mode. So now we're setting presets. It's a very convenient process. You have to do it once and set up all your presets. So for example, this is preset 1. And let's see if I can zoom in a little bit on the controller. There we go. I want this one to autofocus because it's really autofocus on manual focus. And I assign this one to preset number 2. Well, easy as that. So stop assigning presets. Make sure to turn this button off, because otherwise it just overrides the presets you've just made. And by turning this button off, all of a sudden these buttons will become your preset buttons. So instead of setting them, this will help you recall your presets. One funny thing you notice that this button went off because the first preset I've made was using manual focus, and the second preset I've made was using autofocus. So here you can see that the controller is actually reading back the status from the camera, which is a very convenient feature. It gives you really confidence about what settings have I chosen. Is this camera now on autofocus? Is manual focus? Do I need to worry about the focus, or is the camera doing it by itself? So that's very convenient. So it's a very fast way to switch between the presets. Of course, if you want to delete the presets, you've got your reset button. Just press this one, and I want to delete preset number 2 and preset number 1. And now the presets are gone again, so it won't respond to any of these commands any longer. So that's really convenient. So let's zoom out a little bit. There you go. Welcome in my studio again. And that's basically the autofocus and manual focus buttons. So on this side you have a PTZ speed button. So this is a really cool feature, and it's very convenient. As you can see in the screen on the controller, it sets 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and this is basically the speed that is assigned to this controller. So I can go really fast all the way around if I want to. I can make you nauseous if you want to, but that's really not something that you want to do when you're completely zoomed in, because then everything goes really fast. So what I want to do is turn this down completely to setting 1. And now, even though I'm turning it all the way to the left, the camera is going really slow. This gives you very fine control, and it avoids any of the jerky movements basically that you might have when using a controller that doesn't have a button like this. So this is sort of a safety feature. So let's turn it back up again to a regular setting. Usually when zoomed out you can use high speed, but if you are following something that's moving slowly, I would definitely turn it down a little bit. So this is a very convenient button. So let's get myself out of the picture again. There's a couple more buttons that I can explain to you. So here, as you can see, is another zoom button. So this is something that, especially the people that are familiar with broadcast cameras, that they would like a button like this, because it gives you very fine control using two hands instead of just one, because I can zoom in and zoom out by turning this joystick. But as you can imagine, moving a camera in all directions and zooming in at the same time, or controlling the zoom, it's quite a complex motion that you have to do with a single hand. So let's skip the zooming with this hand and move it to this hand. So all of a sudden you can use this hand just for the movement and use the other one to zoom in and zoom out. So both of these are defined by speed button right there. So if you turn this one all the way down, then the zoom goes really slow. If you turn this one up, then everything goes much faster. So this is a way that most broadcast controllers would want to control their cameras. Another feature up there is the auto exposure setting. So if you set your camera to manual exposure and you find yourself in trouble because all of a sudden the sun starts shining even though it wasn't supposed to, and your exposure is really, your image is getting really overexposed, and this is basically your panic button. Just press this one and all of a sudden the camera will jump to auto exposure and take care of the rest. You can override that again by turning this button. You can adjust the brightness if you want to a little bit. You can open and close the iris with this one. So you can go iris up and iris down. And as you can see, the auto exposure setting is turned off again as soon as you touch one of these buttons. On the other side, you have red gain and blue gain combined with this little button right there, which is the white balance mode. So again, if you find yourself in trouble with your manual white balance, press this button. It really is a panic button and everything goes back to automatic white balance mode. Repeatedly pressing this button will switch through the different modes that are there. So you have one push, there's a couple of presets that it will cycle through, and there's a manual white balance setting and an auto white balance setting. There you go. Again, there's some buttons right there. This is when selecting the manual white balance. Here you can set the blue gain and the red gain of the camera, so you can make some fine changes to that. Make sure to set the white balance before you go, because as soon as you turn this one, the camera will switch to a manual white balance setting, and if you haven't set that one up properly, you will definitely notice a color difference. So make sure to do that before you start your production. Make sure that the manual white balance is as close to your automatic white balance or your preferred white balance, so you don't have to make any big changes and the end viewer won't be annoyed by that. That's basically it. Oh, one final feature is this menu button, of course, on the controller. I've already explained to you that it will go into the controller's menu, but if you long press this button, so press and hold it for some time, you can see that it opens the camera OSD. So all of a sudden, with this controller, you can now go into the camera's OSD, move through the menu with your joysticks, change all the settings that you want to change, and if you want to go out of the on-screen display, press and hold this menu button again, and now your on-screen display is off, and you can start zooming in and out and use the joystick as you are used to. So this is just a very basic overview of the features you will find in this controller. Let's switch back to my PowerPoint, and we're almost done with this webinar. So hold on one second, I'll switch to my PowerPoint now. There we are again. So this really is the end of the webinar. If you do have any questions left, please make sure to ask us in the chat window on the right side of your screen. We'll be happy to answer them. We'll keep this room open for maybe 5 or 10 more minutes, and we'll give you some chance to contact us. However, if you find yourself having more questions about this product in particular or any of our other products, please drop us an email, because we'll be always happy to help you and give you technical advice whenever you need. So this recording will be made available afterwards, so anyone who registered, so all of you, will receive an email with the link to this video. It will be hosted on YouTube together with all of our other webinars, which are publicly available. And if you want to buy any of our products, please contact your local reseller or distributor. There will be more webinars in the months to come. We haven't made a definite schedule yet, but we'll make sure to keep you up to date and let you know as soon as possible. So let's end our webinar here. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you a good day. Thank you so much.